appreciate it. I was just letting the audience, kind of the warm-up audience, know what we're doing here. This has now become a series since Jeff Knox was on first, and now you've joined us. And I think I'll be talking with Rocky Marshall here later today or tomorrow about the reform candidacy, the block of 4 reform candidates for the NRA Board of Directors here in February, or now March 1st today, 2022. This has been going on in a very public way for really about 5 years. I think that the vast majority of the gun community and NRA members, regardless of whether you thought it was an attack from the left or you thought it was corruption and you knew it was corrupt from the beginning, there's been a problem with the leadership of the NRA very publicly for 5 years now. Oliver North helped bring it to the forefront. Chris Cox was involved, of course, in trying to get things fixed kind of more quietly internally. And as we know, recently the state of New York, the Attorney General's office in New York, has had a very successful campaign against Wayne LaPierre and some other people to point out the corruption and the financial malfeasance that's been going on at the top. And as many of us who've been involved with this through Save the Second and other efforts believe, basically the board has been negligent in their duties and their responsibilities to the organization and to the members. And now you're running for the board. And there's a block of 4 people that I and many others, Tom Gresham, Michael Bain, the whole Save the Second group, Frank Tate, who's been very active in reform, are all putting our support behind, because you're explicitly and overtly talking about getting onto the board to make a positive change for the members, and not to self-serve and not to self-deal and not to see what's going on, but knowing that there's been a problem. So with that, Dennis, why don't you introduce yourself, because you're of the 4 people on this block, I think you're the one who has maybe been involved as actively and as long as anybody, even Jeff, but maybe more quietly, maybe more behind the scenes to a lot of people. So introduce yourself to the audience, and obviously we'll be sharing this out, and a lot of different audiences will be learning about you maybe for the first time. So Dennis, take it away.
Sure, thank you. Well, I'm a father of 6 and a grandfather of 20 plus. I lose track. I live in Middletown, Virginia. That's in the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. I'm about 45 minutes to an hour from Waples Mill, Fairfax, the building in Fairfax, right next to the Cedar Creek battlefield. Our town is. I've been active in gun rights policy and politics since 1988. I first joined the NRA in '84 as an annual member. I became a life member, I believe, in '95. So I worked for Gun Owners of America as state and local director for about 8 years, from January of '95 to March of 2001. That was founded by State Senator Bill Richardson out of California, who was on the NRA board at times, and he founded Gun Owners of America. I cut my teeth learning my grassroots politics through Gun Owners of America, through Larry Pratt. Very grateful to Larry. I know Larry's living in North Carolina now. I think he's retired. Learned a lot of things about how politics and grassroots organizing works, and applied that knowledge and those skills to passing legislation that was good for gun owners and defeating legislation that was bad for gun owners and for our community, for our culture. And so that's kind of my background. As far as the running for the NRA, I actually would argue mildly that the problems were well noted back in '96 when Neil Knox was involved. I was not part of that inner battle, but I was on the outside watching and observing it, because, of course, the things that affected NRA affected my work at Gun Owners of America, how grassroots people interacted with both groups, and I learned a lot.
Now, let me jump in there and give people a little bit of a perspective just from what I've learned, because we've just met recently and I've become aware of your work. So if we go back to the 90s, that was really late 80s through the early 90s into late 90s is when most people think of the big movement from may issue to shall issue. And I know you were involved in Virginia, getting that successfully passed to shall issue concealed carry permits. So the first concealed carry revolution, the regaining of lost rights, really started as the move from may issue to shall issue. Over the years with McDonald particularly, we've had this then move where the states that didn't even have may issue were forced to at least have that. Now we've got a move where you've got to at least have some version really of shall issue. But the asterisk is, over the last decade, we've seen the big movement for what we now know as constitutional carry. Talk to us about that, because in the 90s, you were already sort of at the forefront of whether, and then I don't know if this was GOA or on through other efforts, but you were really at the forefront of permitless carry movement back in the 90s, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, yeah, because I worked with State Representative Charles Key in 1995 before the OKC bombing, and he had offered an amendment to basically an NRA carry shall issue carry bill that had a lot of internal restrictions that made it difficult for some people to support. I think one of the things I remember was that to get the permit you had to be 25. So Charles Key working with me, and then there was an in-state activist. Kirk Shelley, he drafted an amendment to that bill, offered it as a substitute, which basically made it, back then we called it Vermont carry.
Right.
Now today we would call it appropriately constitutional carry. And we lost that vote. I think we lost that vote. It was 58 to 1 member has a Vermont carry bill. And in going through that experience with Charles Key, Representative Key, I began to incorporate that idea in our candidate surveys for state legislatures. And I'm not, like I said, success has many fathers, failure is an orphan, but I think by sending those surveys out to thousands of state legislative candidates over a period from, say, 1995 to 2000, and I think when I left GOA, they continued it. Bob Duggar continued it with the folks at GOA, and so people were being fed that idea. It was getting on their radar, and then legislators would get, or candidates would get elected, and they'd say, "I'm going to introduce that bill," and that's what I think happened. We've seen it. I remember, and in fact, I do remember Brian Judy working on one when he was with the NRA, working on one in Alaska. I think Alaska came next, maybe Arizona, Alaska, maybe Montana. I lose track of that. But
Vermont was the first place that I could legally carry. So I graduated from high school in Georgia, moved up to Vermont in 1990. I was able to legally carry under their no permit required rules for the first time in my life. So very familiar with kind of the way the landscape was in the 80s and the 90s. But I didn't have that piece of the puzzle that it was actually first voted on outside of Vermont in Oklahoma. So you've been very clearly involved. And I wanted people to have that piece of perspective because, again, your name may not be well known to a lot of the people that are looking at this ballot. Of course, if you've been a member for 5 consecutive years, or if you're a life member or higher level paid in full, you're a voting member and you have the opportunity to support candidates. Those of us interested in reform are supporting 4 candidates and 4 candidates only, even though I personally and other people, and maybe you have other people who are running for the board who are friends, who you respect their work. But when it comes to the NRA Board of Directors, we need people willing to do work inside the NRA to get it fixed. So let's pivot to that for a couple minutes. Please. What do you think are the most important things to do should you get on the board? What will your short-term goals be in terms of reform?
Well, my message will be, and I want to be a voice on the board. I want to understand what's going on the inside. As a board member, I will be apprised of more information than the average member on the outside. But I want to undo what I call the principal agent problem that is developed there. I want the organization to be run for the benefit of the members, not the management. Now, the management does need to be properly compensated and able to do their job, but I want the membership to know what's going on. I want more information out there, and I want to make sure that the bylaws we have that should work are followed, and if there are any necessary bylaw changes, accountability mechanisms that need to be put in, I want to support those.
So some of the tenets, some of the things that like Save the Second has put forth is like 5 tenets of reform. One of them is to focus more exclusively on firearms only issues, Second Amendment issues, not broader political issues or let's say lifestyle even choice issues. And I think that's one of the things that we saw with the NRA, a big pivot in the late 90s, 2000s to focus exclusively on conservative politics and the Republican Party. And as you, I think, mentioned in our brief conversation on the phone, you remember when there were pro-gun Democrats, right, down here in the South?
Yeah. And when they passed one gun a month in Virginia in 93, we got a higher percentage of Democrat votes in the caucus against it than out of the Republicans.
And so the blue dog Democrats or the Southern Democrats, conservative, socially conservative Democrats. And of course, we know at the state level, there's still, especially at state level, there are still many pro-gun state level legislators and representatives acting all over the country. So where would you fall on that you know, making sure that when we're talking about NRA activities, we're talking about firearms activities and not freedom of speech or right to life or immigration or other things. How important do you think that is?
Oh, you've got to keep your issue set narrowly focused. That's where your strength gets concentrated. I'm more than happy to, I'm willing to and I'm going to use this just for referencing, let a left-wing Democrat who believes in gun rights or wants to support gun rights for whatever reason, I'm going to allow them to do that, and work with them. I do think First Amendment, the ability of us as a culture, as a group, as an organization, we do have to protect our First Amendment right, because that's how we avoid having to use our Second Amendment right.
Yeah, it's obviously a component. I think that sometimes some of the special interests, if you will, overshadow what we're doing, and it can be a great rallying call. You've worked a lot with grassroots ideas, not just in the firearms industry, but in other areas of politics as well. And we know that a very, very motivated small base. I mean, the NRA, as large as it ever was, it was never 10% of gun owners, right? And it was like 4 or 5%. And I think one of the things that's come out of the struggles with the NRA has had very publicly is that other organizations, GOA being one of them, Firearms Policy Coalition, but almost more importantly, organizations like Black Guns Matter or liberal gun owners at a liberal gun club have gotten their voice heard more, because I don't think any one organization is ever going to represent all of the values and interests and demographics of almost 100 million gun owners in the US, unless we only focus on gun ownership, right? And that's the only way really to get as broad as possible. So that's the idea of being as large as possible in terms of membership. But what about this as small as possible or smaller in terms of the size of the board? Where do you land?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the board should be 25 or less, and I'm open to proposals. I think it's too big and unwieldy now. I do support continuing having one elected by every member if they can make it to the annual meeting. I think it's a good motivator for people to come to the annual meeting and participate and that sort of thing.
So you're talking about 76 seat, the one that.
So it might be the 26th board member, it might be the 16th board member, It might be the 11th board member. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I'd like to look at that, but I do think 76 is too unwieldy. Sure. I think you get a lot of people that are there but not there. Can I just go back to one thing about, I want our grassroots. I want people to be members of the NRA, and I also want people to be able to exercise local involvement through their own groups. I think that's great. And I have what I call hit 'em high, hit 'em low strategy, where the local groups are providing, besides our own liaisons in the legislatures or in the regulatory bodies, our own local people oftentimes know more about what's going on, have that time and place knowledge that even the best, most accomplished liaison doesn't have. And it's kind of like how the feds rely on the local cops.
That makes sense. What about term limits for board members or even for officer positions? How do you feel about service to the organization over extended periods of time, and how that we know that can feed into self-serving actions, but more importantly, we know there are people that have been sitting on the board for years and years and years, decades in some cases, and barely attended a meeting. So mandatory attendance and term limits have been something that Save the Second has advocated for. Where do you land on those types of?
Well, I would definitely say don't take the job if you're not willing to do the work. So be there. Otherwise, you can't participate, and you're depriving the organization of your talents, skills, and knowledge, which I'm assuming that's why you ran. You have something to contribute. On the term limits, I mean, I think the best term limit is, I'm not opposed to it. I'd like to discuss that idea, but members have the right to terminate or impose a limit on my tenure there. I am only running to be on, one term. I haven't even thought about another term. I'm here to support the reforms that need to be made. I'm not looking to be on the board for 20 years.
Okay. Well, I think that'll be something that people will like hearing, given the current environment and the atmosphere, knowing that there's been a lot of people who've been on the board, maybe as a reward for the work they've done in the greater Second Amendment movement or in their niche areas. They get to the board, they feel like that can help them continue to do their work off the board, but we know a lot of people have not been doing the work on the board. So,
and I don't think board members should be getting paid for any kind of work from the NRA.
Okay.
I don't want any money. I don't want a consulting contract. Do
you see that as would you support that? If not propose it, would you support that as a bylaw change to actually
Oh, absolutely at this point. And then maybe if, in the future, 20 years down the road, if they want to revisit that, that's fine. But short term, I'd like to get rid of that problem. I'd like to get rid of that conflict of interest. I consider it a conflict of interest at this point.
Sure. Yeah. Right now, it's a very sensitive time for sure. But the time is right for reform. The Wayne LaPierre, we've said since that's, I did my first interview on this about 5 minutes after the annual meeting of the members in 2019 and made it really clear. This is not about Wayne LaPierre, but Wayne LaPierre was a big part of the problem and very much a representative of the regime that needs to be changed and the actions that need to be changed. And him resigning and now being found, officially guilty of corruption, I think is important for real reform to start happening now. So I appreciate you running, putting your name out there, stepping more into the spotlight for sure on this topic in front of all the NRA members and in front of the gun community. We'll be sharing this message. As I said with Jeff, you have my support. All 4 candidates have my support. And bullet voting, do you have anything you want to say just in terms of making sure people understand why we're saying vote for you 4 and only you 4?
Absolutely. I mean, if you bullet vote, so a couple things. Getting 4 of us elected in a group sends a message to the. I believe, and like all groups and organizations, there are people who are not directly involved in the failures or the problems that have occurred, and this would encourage them to step up and be better board members. And of course, you don't want to. You don't dilute your vote if you vote for 4 and only 4. So, that's my message on that.
Yeah, I agree.
And also, I want to let people know I'm here to support the members. I appreciate their support, but I want to support them. I want to make sure they have an NRA that provides the training and the education that keeps our culture alive. Because you can't have a political defense, you can't have a political program, a public policy program, a legislative program if you don't have the culture. And the culture are the people, are the members of the NRA. And beyond that, the people that they can influence.
Absolutely. Yeah, grassroots advocacy is where it's at, and that's where we're. It's going to be in the bleachers at our kids' soccer games, and at the coffee shop, and around the water cooler at work. That's where we're going to win the culture war around firearms ownership and normalization. Dennis, I appreciate what you said. I appreciate you running, and we'll get this message out there. And if there's anything else we can do to help the cause, let me know.
Thank you, Rob. Have a great day. Bye bye.